All right, hello, I'm Harold Munro, editor-in-chief at the Vancouver Sun and Province, and joining me is our City Hall columnist, Dan Fumano, on a dreary Monday. But Dan, you've got a story out that you put together I thought was very interesting, kind of looking at what's happening on the development front in Vancouver. Everybody's always interested in these things being going up in their neighborhoods, and a number of developments that are non-compliant, I guess is the term, with existing zoning, but developers are pushing ahead. What's motivating them to do this? And, as opposed to maybe just getting stopped in their tracks.
Yeah, I think it might seem surprising to some residents that developers are even allowed to move projects forward or advance these proposals if they explicitly do not follow city policies. But we spoke with City Hall and they explained there's always been some level of, flexibility and discretion in how policies are applied, but it is a relatively recent phenomenon that there have been more of these non-compliant proposals coming forward. And this is, I spoke last week with a couple of folks from Vancouver City Hall's planning department, and they said this is kind of in response to a few different things. One is just sort of the more challenging development market out there, obviously with high interest rates and construction costs, and there's not a ton of easy development sites left in Vancouver. So developers are sort of needing to sharpen their pencils and come up with different things that maybe don't exactly follow what the policies say. But then the other thing the city staff told me is that this is also responding to direction from elected city councils. So this current council under ABC and Mayor Ken Sim, they have often spoken about a desire to sort of boost housing production, including rethinking some of the old rules. So I've heard Mayor Sim in a few different public speeches now talking about how Vancouver doesn't have a shadow crisis, it has a housing crisis, as a reference to looking at the city's shadowing policies, because they have policies about, if a proposed building would cast shadows on public spaces or parks at different times of day. So that's one of them. And then in the context of the particular building I wrote about in this column, there is a proposed building for Mount Pleasant that would be an 18-story apartment tower on a side street in Mount Pleasant. So it falls within the Broadway plan area. And this policy proposes to break the city's view protection policies. So it would intrude into one of these protected view corridors. And in the past, these rules basically meant that buildings were not allowed to intrude into these publicly protected view corridors. But this city council has already kind of indicated it wants to rethink the view protection guidelines. And last year, council directed staff to look at do a review of the existing view policies. So we are seeing more of these things that don't comply exactly with all of the policies, and in some cases they're coming forward with city staff recommending them. City staff say, even though this doesn't follow the policy, it provides this benefit and that public benefit, and it meets these council goals. So we recommend it. And then there are at least a couple of cases where projects are moving forward without staff's support. And staff are saying, we don't support this for the following reasons, but we're going to leave it to council. And that sort of started happening under the previous council. So as I say, this current council with the ABC majority, they've indicated a desire to sort of break free from some of the old rules. But their predecessors, which was kind of a mixed council led by independent Mayor Kennedy Stewart, this was a big thing that Stewart was sort of championing. He said he had learned there were lots and lots of residential projects, including lots of purpose-built rental and some below-market rental, that were he described them as being kind of stuck in various stages of the development process. They hadn't gotten to council yet for a decision, and they were kind of stuck. So he had expressed, with the support of council, that they wanted to sort of shake some of these loose, get them to council for decisions, even if they didn't follow all the policies. And in some cases, council might reject them. They might say there's very good reasons why these ones aren't getting forward, but there's other ones where they'll say, well, considering these public benefits, we want to advance it. So this is what we're hearing more and more of.
Interesting. I mean, I could see the potential challenge here, because if you're a developer who wants to be approved outside of existing policy, and you get approved, and then the next developer down the street comes along wanting to get approved, again in the same way, and gets rejected, or there'll be accusations of favoritism for one over the other, whether they're accurate or not. But it does create a bit of a uncertainty for developers, perhaps not even a level playing field.
Yeah, I guess that could definitely, that could be a worry.
Right. So why not just change the policies? Like, if you don't think these
So,
policies should apply, why
yep.
not just change them? Yeah.
So the answer is, I mean, the way city staff described it to me is, it just, policies are slow to change. So they are trying to they are trying to sort of update the city's overall plan, which would, once it's finished, would reduce the need for individual spot by spot rezonings, right? There obviously still would be some, but this massive citywide plan that they're working on, and with a target to have it finished in a couple of years, that would change a lot of the policies and reduce the frequency and the need for these individual site by site public hearing decisions. But what city staff said to me is, councils change, their priorities change, and sometimes the policies don't change as fast as the priorities do. Like, it just
Right.
takes policies a while to catch up. I mean, just earlier this year, council approved these twin towers in southeast Vancouver, in the Joyce Collingwood area, near the Joyce Collingwood SkyTrain station. They were taller and denser than what the Joyce Collingwood area plan allowed. But the policy was, written, I think, 10, 15 years ago. And frankly, there are some area plans in place that are older than that still in Vancouver. So there's some area plans in place that were just written in a different environment. And city staff are saying that, it's not easy or fast to change these policies, right? So in some cases, they're saying, let's make some decisions instead of waiting, potentially years for the policies to get updated. Let's make some decisions
Well,
now.
that's interesting, because
But some people will be worried about that, of course, because they'll feel like, if you're making these
Right.
decisions and kind of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you contrast that to what the provincial government has done with the stroke of a few pens on a few bills. They've dramatically changed policies for all municipalities and cities, including Vancouver. So when it comes to something like, for example, the prescribed density around SkyTrain stations within 400 meters, 800 meters, do those provincial policies, new policies, trump the city's view corridor policies, or how does that work?
So I was trying to get an answer to that question when I had my
Okay.
interview with these two folks from City Hall. And the short version of it, as I understand, is it remains to be seen. They are still basically in the process. So city staff, Vancouver city staff, and I'm sure at other municipalities around the province, have been away working on these things and trying to figure out what are the implications for these new provincial policies, and how are they actually going to, how will the rubber meet the road, kind of thing. Like, how will they actually
Right.
work? And very soon, I think next week, city staff will be presenting to Vancouver City Council with kind of an update on, here's what we think is going to happen. And at some point, they're also going to be seeking council's direction on this. So as you say, the province has come out and said they're going to have minimum heights and densities that will need to be that cities will need to allow near transit stations. But my understanding is that, well, cities won't be able to reject developments based on height and density. There will be other considerations that they might be able to limit the types or the size of applications. Other considerations could potentially include heritage neighborhoods, right? So two of Vancouver's most historic neighborhoods, Gastown and Chinatown, are close to transit hubs, could potentially be caught in this upzoning. But, the housing minister has explicitly said that it's not meant to be leading to the demolition of heritage character neighborhoods. And then there are other potential considerations. I don't know if protected view corridors would be one of them. But anyway, the short answer is, it sounds like they're still working through exactly what this will mean. And I think it sounds like we'll have more clarity in the next weeks or months, maybe by this
Yeah.
summer.
Well, I was under the impression that the housing minister, Ravi Kahlon, set an end of June for municipalities to have updated their plans. But how can they
Yes.
update their plans if they don't even know what the rules are?
Yeah, I think it sounds like this is all, they're building the plane as they're flying it, as they say.
I did see the province's second largest city. I was looking at a staff report from Surrey that was going to council and talking about this same thing along that future SkyTrain line from Surrey to Langley. And they were adjusting sort of the core area that because they obviously were looking at density near SkyTrain, but they were adding little bits around some of them. But there was one station, I think it was out in the Clayton neighborhood of Surrey, which is residential, but no real high rise right now, where they were looking at significantly growing the space for density based on the province's new rules. So again, I don't know what that does along, because Vancouver already was planning quite a lot of density along the Broadway corridor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, and I spoke just last week with the housing minister, and I spoke with the city hall folks as well. And then when you talk to the mayor and councillors, in a lot of ways, the stuff the province is implementing kind of broadly aligns with the direction Vancouver is going, and a
Yes.
lot of other municipalities as well. There are some municipalities where that's not the case. There are some municipalities that are sort of more resistant to what the province is trying to bring in. And then there's some municipalities that are broadly kind of aligned with these goals, but feel a little bit run off their feet, like they're having to scramble and try to figure this out.
Right. Right.
And it's not easy. But then, the province has kind of made the point that if it feels fast, it is supposed to be fast. The previous years and decades of housing reform have been too tentative and not gone far enough. And then that's kind of why we're in the way the housing minister describes it. We're sort of decades and decades behind, and we need to catch up, and doing iterative kind of tinkering around the edges is not what they want to do now.
Okay. Well, that's great. I'm look forward to whatever comes to council next week. That'll be
Yeah,
another
it'll be
story
interesting.
for you. All right. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Harold. Thank you.